Fountain Street Church, happy Sunday. It filled my heart with joy to see the images of so many people in the streets yesterday, voicing their frustration, but gathering together in solidarity. And something very special happened right here in Grand Rapids. I saw 24 clergy leading that march here in this city. Many of them did so at great professional risk. Not every pulpit in this town is free. Not every clergy person in this town is free to express themselves. And so for many of them, that was a tremendous risk that they took and a courageous thing that they did, regardless of how we may feel about them or how they're about the politics of the situation. To see clergy practicing their beliefs in public is a sign of health and light and life. And so it has been my habit also to listen to their sermons. I listened to about 6 or 7 or 8 sermons, and I'm happy to report that things are stirring in the pulpits of our sibling churches, and that also is a very, very good thing. So over the course of the last few weeks, we've been talking together about this theme of beloved community and how Fountain Street Church reflects this concept and how we might also lean into growing our beloved community inside and outside the walls of the church. I've been integrating also the image of a circle in to build this, inspired by the circle above and also the circle there, and there's circles all over the place, and I need some kind of thing to center my thoughts, and so I've been using the metaphor of a circle. So we talked about circles of light, growing the circle of light so that we can find the things that we may be missing to do the work we've got to do. Last week we spoke about circles of hope, these images and reflections of hope that are cast into the future, that were cast by our ancestors for us to stand and center ourselves in. And our own presence here is confirmation of their judicious hopes. And today I want us to consider a circle of strength. Strength that we build together or perhaps fail to build together. And all of this together, for me, conjures up an image of a growing garden, expanding outward through care and stewardship, or a labyrinth. You know, I know a lot of you have walked a labyrinth at some point. You know, there was a whole big revival of Celtic spirituality and Celtic Christianity in the late 90s, and still going, still cooking along. I think the Wild Goose Festival and that, and Book of Kells and the Triskelion, and there's people have cool tattoos now, and it's all good. It's good. Go for it. A labyrinth, you walk into the center, and then you make your way back out again. And I imagine this season that Fountain Street Church has been in has been one of walking into the center of that circle, and now we begin walking out again. Outward. At a deeper level, this is, I guess, a more theoretical level. All of this is more or less indicative of a conversation that is happening in practical theology in the divinity schools and elsewhere that is talking about moving away from individualism in almost every aspect of our society and culture. Moving away from individualism, and individualism in theology and in the church is probably best exemplified by the very modern, somewhat recent fundamentalist idea of individual salvation. That's a Johnny-come-lately to the canon of Christian theology, this idea that we're individually saved through an individual relationship with Jesus or God. Moving away from that fantasy that the individual human is the fulcrum of salvation and meaning, and then moving back toward a much more traditional and ancient understanding that it is not the individual that succeeds or fails. It is not the individual that is perhaps either elect or reprobate or whatever, but it is the community itself that is the focus of creation and life and thriving and wellness. This is something that our Jewish friends have sustained and held on to through the millennia that other traditions wander away from during particular seasons and centuries. So for the majority of human history, including during the years of the authorship of the Bible itself and the history of the veneration of this book, it was assumed to be the case that the community was the center of the fulcrum of salvation or failure. A person is not a circle. A people holding one another make a circle. Be it if it's two people wrapped in an embrace of love, or a village, or even, God help us, a denomination. We try to make circles. The fundamental truth, though, of this theological move, is that it is in many ways incompatible with an economic system that reduces communities down to their smallest constituent components in order to maximize the extraction of labor or concentrate surplus wealth. So capitalism often recoils from communitarianism in the way that cellophane shrinks away from a flame or something like that. And I think that we are at a point in our history where these two values, these two identities, community or individual, may be locked in a life and death struggle. So a beloved community can never exist in the form of a single person. And because I read books and I believe in science, and that's, what a ridiculous thing to have to say. I believe in science. I believe the earth revolves around the sun. Okay, it's just silly qualifications. I will tell you that the truth is, the science says that without community, without the physical proximity and availability of other human beings, that humans in isolation will become sick and eventually die. And because we are endowed with tremendous creative potential inside ourselves, people have the power to do harm, to do great and destructive harm as they wither and die in isolation. So like a predator, an animal that's caught in a snare, a person will tear at the world around them as the light begins to dim. And they become irrational and violent and destructive. They can. And so we're all terribly familiar with the endless tide of gun violence in America. Mass shootings, these insane, destructive acts of men who are so often dying in despair, so desperately starved for community, and so weakened, their soul made so weak and thin by their alienation and isolation, that they take hold of the nearest thing they can find in order to assert some kind of power, in order to proclaim that they are real. The power of a trapped animal, any tool they can find to realize themselves in the face of the void where their community ought to be. And because this is America, and because America as a nation, it worships the great Moloch of violence, they pick up a gun. And because American civic religion is really bitheistic. It is really a religion of two gods, that is to say. There are others dying in isolation who'd rather worship mammon, who believe that wealth is the answer to their isolation. And so they invest wealth with the real power behind the universe. These men are not committing random acts of terrorism, murdering dozens of innocents. They are lashing out and committing acts of violence that murder millions. Millions. This genocide in Gaza. We have witnessed the callous conversations about real estate, depopulated shorelines. And here in America, the wage slavery that entraps millions of Americans, the tidal wave of needless death in our country that is a result of the worship of wealth over common good. And finally, the destruction of the only planet that we have, the only home our species has ever known. These idolatries step into the void where community ought to exist because they appear powerful. But they each possess, each of them, both of them, a fatal flaw. And we will exploit that flaw to cast them down and to disarm their acolytes. So the strength, the raw power that is required to halt the twin destructive worships of wealth and violence over human life has a name. It has a name, and it can be cultivated. The strength can be summoned up out of the midst of human community. It is referred to by Jesus of Nazareth when he says that the only thing required is that two or more are gathered. This powerful force is called empathy. Empathy. Now, the destructive forces arrayed against life, against creation, these forces of hell, if you will, they are many things. They are wasteful and callous. They may be crass and uncreative, and they may be, and I think worst of all, in my opinion, humorless, but they're not stupid. Empathy is the final bastion of the human spirit. Empathy is the last drawbridge to the inner sanctum of the keep of the human heart. And it arises out of community. And so we see the very careful dismantling of human community. We see the very careful simulacrums of community that we are tricked into believing are real. The forces array themselves against human flourishing have now apparently, publicly, designated empathy as a sin, which is madness, but there is a logic to it. Well, think about this like as a political scientist, right? I'm not just being poetic here. Weak men, very weak men, like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, and the men who platform them, like Joe Rogan most recently, have been making the rounds, pouring this poison into the ears and minds of millions of American men specifically, that empathy is a weakness. And now Elon Musk has gone so far as to claim that, quote, empathy is the fundamental weakness of Western civilization, end quote. Empathy is weakness. Yeah, sure. And war is peace, and freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength. Orwell himself could not have come up with this stuff. And to these babbling billionaire children, Jesus of Nazareth responds, says, no, in fact, there is no greater commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Powerful men who have not been ensnared. American men, and I'm speaking to men specifically here, men of real strength. History remembers them not for their self-serving, self-made power or their individual celebrity, not for being titans of independence. History remembers them for their sacrifice. Their sacrifice. So history remembers them for their empathy. John Jacob Astor and Isidor Straus and Benjamin Guggenheim, who immediately and willingly gave up their place on the lifeboat of the sinking Titanic to save the lives of strangers. Men of strength because of their empathy. I think about Milton Olive III, who was the first black man to receive the Medal of Honor for throwing himself onto a live grenade and clutching it to his chest to save the lives of his fellow soldiers during the Vietnam War. And Frank DeMartin and Pablo Ortiz, who were two regular New York men working for the Port Authority on September 11th, 2001, who refused to leave the burning towers and who remained for over an hour and a half to evacuate the 88th through the 91st floor, saving 77 lives. Empathy is not a sin. Cowardice is a sin. Cowardice is self-serving. Cowardice is the craven man who, despite having been handed everything in his life, chooses to serve himself, center himself, worship himself, and who, seeing the common good and the fellow human in danger, chooses the coward's path. Empathy is not a sin. Empathy is the greatest strength a human being can possess. We have known this from the beginning. Empathy is the great miracle. It's the wonderful light that dwells within the inner sanctum of the temple of the human soul. And I believe, my faith tells me that empathy is the indelible mark of divinity, the signature of the hand of the architect of the human. And insofar as it will take great strength to save the world will not be saved by cowardice or greed or violence. For Mammon and Moloch, they do not save creation. They exist only to destroy and destroy and destroy. It will take tremendous strength to save the world. The greatest strength a human being can exercise is empathy. And so we can say with St. Paul that of all the gifts of the Spirit, the greatest of these is love. Or with Dorothy Day, we can say that nothing is more beautiful than love, and love will save the world. Empathy is the purest and deepest form of love, and love will save the world. I chose a reading today from Gregory Boyle's book, Tattoos on the Heart. He is also a Roman Catholic. I didn't mean to select readings from these two Roman Catholics. It just worked out that way. But Father Boyle's book, Tattoos on the Heart, is a story of his strength in practicing empathy in a very dark place in the world. But it is also the strength that he found among the men who he met, who learned how to be strong by practicing empathy. So in the coming seasons of the Fountain Street Church, we will continue to build this circle of light. We can see and learn more about who we are and what our gifts are. And we have to discover our own personal callings, and a circle of light is needed. And we will continue to explore circles of hope which are the building blocks that have been given to us by the generations who've come before, the hopes of our ancestors. I wish I could tell David Rankin that to his face. He passed away before I began my work. That he was right. His judicious hope was justified and confirmed, because here we are. We'll find that circle of hope. But we'll do these things not in service to ourselves as individuals so that we can individually overcome the terrible existential crises of our own personal lives, but because we are going to grow something together that is very strong, very strong. Greater than the sum of its parts is a circle of strength. Great and towering strength. It will be heard when those bells soon ring. It will be an irresistible force like the world has never known, I believe. Great and powerful strength founded on the greatest of all of the gifts of the Spirit, the greatest power that a human being can possess, a circle of strength built on empathy for all, for ourselves and for all. Now, I don't know, and I can't know everything that is happening in your lives right now. And I know it is hard. I know. And I know that we're looking for strong people. And I saw millions of them in the streets yesterday. I saw them searching for their people. So for you today, I can make this promise. Your people are here. They are here at Fountain Street Church. They're here whether you found them yet or not. They're here. And so you need to learn each other's names, yes, and you need to learn each other's stories, and then you've got to begin to lean on each other for strength. You will find no better place to seek out the strength that you need. We will not fear the weak, cowardly men who claim to find strength only in themselves. You can watch them casting about like a dysregulated, angry child. Pray for them if that's your practice. But don't believe that they are strong. They are not strong. At least they are certainly not strong enough to save the world. You will find strength and greatness here, in this place, among these people, and together we will build a circle of strength, and then we will build it wider and wider and wider, because this place knows no limits. It knows no boundaries. And because of this strength, Fountain Street Church will grow and grow, and it will meet these coming days with a force unlike anything this city has ever seen. Amen.